Good afternoon, everyone. I am thrilled to have joined Bond as an associate within our esteemed healthcare and long-term care practice group these past few months and be a part of this insightful series. I'm very much looking forward to engaging with each of you as we explore these critical topics together. I am delighted to welcome you to the 8th installment of our series on New York State's Medicaid program and its compliance systems. If you've registered, you should have received links to past sessions and content from our 7 preceding webinars. Our first speaker today will be Michael Dillard, OMEG's Deputy Medicaid Inspector General for Audit, who brings a wealth of wisdom being a key member of the executive management team, managing the strategic direction and overall operation of the Division of Medicaid Audit. We also expect to hear from OMEG's Charlie Faulkner, Director of OMEG's Managed Care Network Provider and Fee-for-Service Review of the Western Region, who plays a key role in OMEG's protocol efforts. Later, we'll hold a moderated discussion led by Bond Attorney Gabe Oberfield and William Schwartz, who leads OMEG's Office of Public Affairs. In this webinar format, note that we will not be able to see or hear you. However, you will be able to submit your questions via Zoom's question and answer function. We will do our best to address your questions in real time. And as we have done in the past, we will offer additional guidance via email to you that follows the webinar, wherever warranted. We plan to wrap up by 1 o'clock, and please note the webinar is being recorded and will be distributed to you along with today's slides. Now I'd like to turn it over to Gabe Oberfield for a few words of introduction.
Thank you so much, and let me reiterate the warm welcome that Bond has for Kadeen Maitland, who just introduced the webinar and who's sitting in our Westchester office. We are delighted that we have all of you as audience members here for our 8th installment of this ongoing educational series with the New York State Office of the Medicaid Inspector General. And you've had the pleasure of hearing from some of our panelists before. You have not yet heard from Charles Faulkner. We think, as between Michael and Charles, you will have a lot to learn. We saw a significant amount of interest in this program. We're very much glad that we can bring it to you and continue the educational efforts, which will be ongoing. For the moment, though, let me extend my thanks to the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General for its willingness to participate in this series with Bond, in specific to Charles, to Bill, and to Michael for their time today. And with that, let me welcome Michael onto the webinar. And Michael, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe, for that gracious introduction. Very happy to be here with everyone today. So today we're here to talk about OMEG's audit protocols, the process for their development, and some key issues and information concerning them. We can go to the next slide. So Office of Medicaid Inspector General, independent entity within the New York State Department of Health, created to promote and protect the integrity of the Medicaid program. On this slide, we have our mission. I won't read that out loud. We can go to the next slide. So our guiding principles when we conduct audits is to maximize Medicaid program integrity. We do that through our audits and also through our investigative and other work, compliance program requirements also. Improve awareness and stakeholder relationships through sessions such as these. This is a good opportunity to share more information about how we develop audit protocols, what the purpose of those documents are, and how providers can best utilize them. Also want to strengthen compliance and encourage self-disclosures. I've spoken in sessions like this before. I will speak about self-disclosure again today, the importance of compliance programs and actively and proactively self-disclosing any issues to our office, which helps to mitigate future audit findings. And of course, we also want to promote the quality of care and preserve Medicaid resources and ensure access to care for our Medicaid beneficiaries. Next slide. So these past several months, 6 months or so, we've been very active in publishing updated protocols. Those who have been following us on our listserv, which is a great resource for getting information on new and recently published audit protocols. We've been very active in publishing those. I know that a lot of these have moved into what is the public health emergency period. Charlie will speak a little bit more about how we're approaching that period in a couple of slides. And I expect, and if you followed, you'll see on our website recent updates that have been made to provide more proactive information on when audit protocols, we expect those to be updated and released, in addition to an archive of previously published protocols. So I expect that over the next year to 18 months, we'll continue to be very active in getting protocols updated and published. So very pleased with what we've been able to accomplish so far, and certainly more to come. Next slide. So an audit protocol is intended to summarize the audit criteria for the rules and regulations governing specific program areas looking in a previous period of time. So you'll see in most of our protocols, particularly if you look on our website, anything that's published, the newer protocols list specific service date ranges. And those service date ranges take us up to a specific point in time, 2022, 2023. You won't see protocols that are going to be referencing typically to the present day, because our audits are conducted retrospectively. We're looking at a period of time in the past, and the protocols are intended to summarize the rules and regulations that were in place at the time periods that are going to be covered by our audits. Hearing decisions have held. These are working documents, guidelines to auditors and to the provider community. They are not by and of themselves the basis for disallowances of audited claims. The basis for why we may take a disallowance is based in the rules and regulations of the Department of Health or one of the other oversight agencies. So protocols are not rules in and of themselves. They are simply documents that summarize the rules and regulations that were in place. Next slide. They are intended, and anyone who has seen an audit protocol, I'm sure, sees the cover page that goes through the typical disclaimers, but they are intended as guidance. We publish them for the provider community as a form of guidance as to what the rules and regulations were in place at the time and what we're relying upon when we conduct our audits. They focus on the criteria listed in the protocol, but additional findings could always be uncovered in the course of the audit that may not necessarily be captured within a protocol. Not typical, but can happen. I think it's critical to remember that protocols are not a substitute for the review of statutory and regulatory law. And certainly, since these are documents summarizing rules that were in place in a prior period, providers should be, when providing services in those prior periods, following the rules and regulations, and be familiar with them at the time the services are being provided. This slide includes an infographic that shows the different phases for audit protocol development. I'm going to turn it over to Charlie for him to take us through the different phases of audit protocol development and share some additional information concerning them. I will just say for the final bullet that that's the link to our audit protocol page on the website. Lists all the current protocols that have been published, an archive of previous protocols, and also includes a series of FAQs that covers a lot of the information that we'll be going through here today as well. So that's an excellent resource for anyone who hasn't looked at it. Charlie, with that, I will turn it over to you to take us through the next few slides.
Thanks, Mike. So good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, why or when is a new protocol developed? I think it goes down to, is there a new service or a new, benefit, something promulgated that, we need to take a look at. Another reason is an expansion of an existing program area. It's something we previously didn't have a protocol for. It's become a much bigger service throughout the state. Something we then want to get protocols in place because it's going to be an area that we are auditing. Emergence of new risk areas or program vulnerabilities. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. OMIG's always evaluating, where there are risks or program vulnerabilities, and in response to those, we're going to be auditing those areas. We would start the process of developing a new protocol. OIG, AG, OSC recommendations or compliance mandates. That's kind of in response, oftentimes the federal audits or an OSC audit, something like that. Is an area, they identify areas that we need to look at, and we need to have more oversight in. That will often result in new protocols getting developed. And then a change in billing structure, provider type, for example, shifting from institutional to community-based settings. Oftentimes, with I know in the past, changing from a threshold visit to APGs or something like that would be, constitute when we develop a new protocol. You can go to the next slide. So this gets into protocols being updated or discontinued. What are the reasons behind that? Why do we update existing protocols? Oftentimes, I would say probably the most often time, is that regulations are updated, or significant program guidance is issued from, usually it's the O agencies and Department of Health. When the regulations get revised, we need to do a complete review of that because oftentimes there's major changes. What was in the previous protocols, often changes to the new ones. Another reason would be, we're removing a finding type or we're adding a finding type. This is often, done through our experience, what we are seeing in our audits and talking to the program agencies and stuff like that, to, make a, determination of, is this a finding type we should be, looking at? New claims processing rules or edits, that is sort of, are there new edits put in place? Are there different ways of processing the claims? Like I said, kind of going from like and I know in OASIS, in OMH, they had the threshold visits. They went, they transitioned completely to APGs. That's something, the way the claims are reimbursed is how we have to look at, how we're looking at the claims. When that changes, that often necessitates new findings or deletions of old findings, stuff like that. Clarification of audit finding types. This is just basically trying to make the title more clear or the language in the protocol more clear. This is, just trying to provide, proper, clear guidance to providers and to our auditors of, sometimes when we initially come, it might not be clear, what we're exactly looking for, something like that. Events outside of our control. The big example is, the COVID-19 public health emergency. I'm going to get into it a little bit more later, but there, because of that event, there was obviously, as you all know, tons of guidance, changes, things like that, that provide, that applied to Medicaid providers. We have to be cognizant of that and add that sort of guidance to our protocols, to know that we're, so the providers know and our auditors know that we are looking at that. And there were all sorts of changes to the rules, temporary, in that time frame that apply, that we have to make part of our protocols. Expiration of applicable service dates. You'll see, as Mike mentioned, we're adding the service dates onto all protocols that come up, that get posted to our website. And when that date expires, I think we need to be looking at that to make sure that we're having current sets of protocols up to date. Usually, I would think that some of the reasons mentioned above will happen before an expiration. So something will come into, the regulations will get revised before we get to that point of what we would look back at. So I think it's just something we're going to be constantly evaluating as we've added those service dates to our documents. Reasons for protocol discontinuance and why it would get added to our archives, something we wouldn't be updating anymore. It's like the service or program is no longer active or reimbursed, or the scope of what the audit protocol was looking at has been absorbed into other programs. You see this a lot in like the O agencies, where there were elements of one program that were now being reimbursed by another program. We typically, will take the requirements for that and work it into the newer protocols. If you can go to the next slide, please. So protocol updates, just some information on that before we get into the actual process. The audits in progress, I think there's questions around when the audits are in progress and the protocols are updated. How does that affect the audit in progress? There should be, I said, no impact. Audits in progress, as we stated before, they remain bound to the regulations and the guidance that were active at the time the service occurred. When the protocols are updated, the policies are included to cover our audits that are in progress, through the time of the update. So, I'll get into it a little later, but that's why you'll see some expanded for service dates on our protocols, going back to 2015 for a protocol that's issued now. So that's why you see that. Providers are updated, they'll be informed of protocol updates through our official OMIG channels, not limited to the agency listserv, the public website, Medicaid updates, social media channels. We want to get the news out there when we do update the protocol. Oftentimes, because of our engagement with the provider associations, things like that, I think many providers will know that an update is coming, but when it gets, when you're informed by these official channels, that's when our, the new protocol would be official. And we did recently launch our enhanced protocol website. So I think about a month or two ago, we made some really good updates to the website. And it's going to have all of our current protocols, archive protocols, information on new protocols in development, and targeted publication dates for our existing, protocols, to the best of our ability. We also have a FAQ on there that speaks to some of the questions we see about protocols that, can hopefully answer some of the, more common questions that we get. If you want to go to the next slide. So the protocol development process, this goes back to that diagram that was on, I believe, slide 6. We break it down into 4 phases. There's a bunch of micro steps in there that I, don't want to bore you. Won't get into the whole thing, but we'll just break it down by the steps here and kind of show you how the protocols are developed. Starts out with our phase 1 is draft protocol and approval. The subject matter experts, every program area that we have has a subject matter expert. They will do research and review the rules, guidance, laws, have there been updates, things like that. They will then draft up an initial copy. They'll go through everything, go through all the rules, regs, guidance, everything like that, draft up an initial copy of what our protocols are going to look like using, we have a standard format, across all the program types, and they will have that initial draft. The initial draft will then be reviewed and approved by a bureau director such as myself. We'll, do an initial overview of everything, make sure everything is good. This says provider audit bureau director. There's been some recent changes in the time that we did this side that yes, referred to now, no longer as the managed care network provider and fee-for-service bureau director, but bureau provider audit. So the provider audit bureau director will review these and then send back to the subject matter expert saying that these are, the initial draft is approved. Phase 2 is very important phase in this whole process. This is the program agency review. What we do at this point is we will share the protocols, the initial draft protocols, with the appropriate oversight group. For your O agencies, we have contacts at OASIS, OMH, OPWDD, and then for things that are overseen by Department of Health, we have appropriate contacts in all their bureaus there. We send them to the groups at these agencies, and we basically collaborate with them to discuss everything. Are we reading these right? What has changed? And what's very important is what guidance have you issued to providers speaking on these regulations? Oftentimes when the regulations get updated, it's, they're accessible, we know where they are, everything like that. Some of the guidance issued by the program agencies, it's definitely a collaborative effort with them so that they ensure that we get the appropriate guidance to, work into our protocols. Usually we'll send them over to the agencies to review. Then we'll have a series of meetings to discuss what, we have in there and what changes they see, or what revisions they think need to be made, making sure that we're kind of on the same page of what we're putting out there in terms of our audit protocols and that we're reading the regulations and the guidance correctly. Usually this, like I said, done over a series of meetings to discuss, and with the appropriate oversight people there. Revisions are then made based on program agency input. We go back, make revisions, we'll review them with the program agencies, and then we'll move on to step 3. So if you want to.
Hi, it's Bill Shores. I just want to add a point. frequently OMIG receives questions on protocols, when they'll be updated. And we're getting into all of that, but that phase that Charlie was just referencing is obviously very critical. It demonstrates that we want these protocols completely informed at that phase with the oversight agency, and questions related to sometimes it takes a long time for a protocol come out. We're not going to sacrifice accuracy and clarity. We work as quickly as possible, but that is a critical step, just to reinforce what Charlie was saying. And that is a critical part of the process. And of course, what Charlie's about to talk about in the other phases, but I just wanted to highlight that point. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. So for phase 3, internal quality review, this is where it undergoes, our review for proper legal citation, and sort of, making sure that there's no typos, things like that. We do kind of a total review to make sure everything is good for the public, everything is good on our end, to make sure that these are of the, they are of quality to be posted, making sure that we are citing the correct laws and regulations and things like that. And then phase 4, is stakeholder review. I think this is also a very important part of our review. This is where the draft version of protocols are shared with the provider associations for feedback. We will send them to the appropriate provider associations before we finalize them. The provider associations will review, and they will send back comments, thoughts, everything. We review all of the comments, and we make revisions where necessary. Oftentimes, sometimes there's guidance that we miss, clarifications of things. Sometimes, they're explaining situations where certain things might happen. We review everything, and we will make changes based on that. If it's applicable to what we need to make, if it's applicable, and it's something that we need to implement into our protocols. We will, after that, we will do a final review where we'll just do a last check. The director will review these, Mike, and then the bureau director, and several other internal reviews before we post them to the website. And then at that point, once we've done a final review of everything and we've worked into, we've made any revisions necessary to the stakeholder feedback, we will then publish those to our website, and the appropriate announcements will go out. If you can go to the next slide. Provider feedback, as we said, stakeholders and providers associations are afforded the opportunity for feedback with when we send them out. Provider associations really have discretion on how they choose to comment. Comments can indicate perceived errors, discrepancies, or disagreements, request additional policy be referenced, and/or request that additional information be included for clarity purposes.
Charlie, can I add
Sure.
on another point here?
Sure.
Bill, again, I do have a role specifically in this aspect of it to the audience. And we consider this, a vital aspect of informing the protocols. I do want to mention that, we provide ample time for stakeholders to review, and it's not a hard deadline. We try and give ample time, but in any occasion where an association or stakeholder says, could we get an extra week or so? That's never been a problem. But beyond that, there have been occasions it's rare, but we absolutely will entertain it if stakeholders want to have an actual conversation. We've done it in some circumstances in a format somewhat similar to this, to get some additional feedback and clarify things. So we do have a process, but we want to encourage and engage all relevant parties in as many ways as we can without sacrificing the need to get the protocols completed. So I just wanted to make that point. So sorry to interrupt, Charlie, but thank you.
No problem. All righty. All right. So the protocols and for service dates. We're listing the 4 service dates at the beginning of the protocol document to just kind of reference the time frame that these protocols will apply to. Oh boy, my light went out in here. Oftentimes, the 4 service dates will extend beyond 6 years. That's because we're trying to design these, as we said, to account for audits that are in progress. They're designed to reflect any relevant changes that may have occurred over an extended period. Want to emphasize this does not represent the time frame that each audit will cover. We're still bound to a 6-year look back period for audits. As required in the law. So when you see that 9-year 4 service dates range, we just want to emphasize our audits are not now going to be covering a 9-year period or something like that. We are still bound to the rules of the 6-year look back period. Previous versions did not, may not have included 4 service dates. Going forward, we are making sure to include those on all for clarity purposes of what these, the timeframes that these protocols cover. So we think that's a good change, and we're going to be implementing those on all updates that come through. Please go to the next slide. The public health emergency. There were lots, as I discussed earlier, lots of flexibilities and waivers relating to program guidance and billing. We are, one of the reasons we've been so active issuing these protocols is we, recognize a need to get this guidance into our protocols because we're going to be looking at that period as time goes on. We work with the program agencies in order to compile them and get them worked into the protocols in an appropriate manner. Page 2 of all the sets of protocols that are being updated that pertain to this time contain a chart listing out the relevant guidance, issued by program agencies. And, we will apply these flexibilities when reviewing the claims and records in the period in question. Audit staff are, expected to review the claims in the context of the public health emergency. Flexibilities and waivers, didn't apply to all regulations and policies though. So audit disallowances may still apply to claims that, don't meet all requirements. Go to the next slide, please. Questions on posted protocols. Questions on the protocols or OMIG's audit process. The site is listed there. Questions related to Medicaid policies cited within the protocols should be directed to the relevant oversight agency, DOH, DO agencies, etc. If the provider suspects there's an error or discrepancy, again, you're encouraged to contact the OMIG mailbox. And, we are dedicated to trying to make these documents as accurate as possible. So we encourage and welcome all feedback.
Charlie and Mike, thank you both. Very informative. And as has been our practice with the previous webinars, we want to use the latter component of the time we have with you to go through some of the questions that we have, both those that have come up vis-a-vis the Q&A function and those that we thought that we would ask just to spur conversation. But let's start with the chat and specifically with the Q&A. And Mike, let me ask you, there's one from an audience member concerning the definition of program agency, specifically asking whether we mean a state or whether the OMIG means a state office or agency relative to a provider and an organization of that footing. Could you clarify that, please? Because that's an important I think, operational definition for the purposes of today's learning.
Sure. We're referring, and I think this is in the context of the development process and our interaction with program agencies. We're referring to the state agency like Department of Health, or one of the offices like Office of Mental Health, office with persons with developmental disabilities, OASIS, the different O agencies that we may work with on different protocols.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful and clarifying. And as among us, both Bill and Kadeen may be asking further questions, but let me move into another from the Q&A. There are references to provider associations that each of you in particular, Charlie, has made. What are some of the provider associations that you've worked with, as you can volunteer them, just to give the audience a flavor of some of those touch points?
If you don't mind, I'll take that one. To my colleagues, as you all know, there's essentially an association for everything. So I really can't think of an association within the healthcare Medicaid realm that we do not interact with. I'll give you a number of examples. The way we do the protocols it's specific to that service type. So if it relates to, say, hospital systems, or as an affiliate service of hospitals, we will send protocols to, among others, the Greater New York Hospital Association, the Healthcare Association of New York State, and again, specific to the protocol service type, others will be added. The Home Care Association of New York State, New York State Health Facilities Association, the Association for Durable Medical Equipment Providers. We really work hard to make sure that we're not leaving anyone out. And I personally reach out, in addition to sending the protocols, to make sure that if that stakeholder group feels that there's another entity party that should receive them, that we may not be aware of, because new ones are created often, we will reach out. The goal is to send those to the organizations and stakeholders that where their feedback is critical, and but at the same time not send a protocol that has absolutely nothing to do with a certain association. That would not be useful work of productive use of anyone's time. So and we update our stakeholder list, but there again, it's very important, and we encourage folks to reach out to us and let us know, if there are organizations, groups, stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, that we need to know and meet. Please reach out. And the best way to do that is right there on the screen, the information at OMIG. I monitor that, and we'll get them on the list. Is that helpful?
That's a very helpful answer and provides clarity around the breadth of outreach that your office makes to receive feedback and ensure that community voices are considered in what you put forth, while the drafting process is happening. I will note, of course, here at Bond, in connection with the educational purpose behind these webinars. If any of those in the audience has something specific that is interested in getting to the attention of the OMIG, feel free to utilize us as well as a conduit in order to make sure you have that opportunity to contribute. Moving on, I want to just shift to a different question that's posed within the Q&A. There is a lot of attention, of course, 5 years on from when we all realized that we were living through a pandemic, and that changed so much for so many of us here involved in both the presentation and the participation with today's webinar. What has the OMIG thought about in terms of specific approaches to that period as it relates to operations generally? Put another way, a question that I'm extrapolating from here is, has the OMIG taken any, specific pandemic relating approach around how it is overseeing or otherwise, reviewing the activities of Medicaid providers during that period relative to the, specific protocols, including those that you walk through today? So any insight on that dynamic would be, I think, quite useful.
I'll let Mike start. And then I think I'll approach that question, from more my realm of what we do here at OMIG. So I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, that's fine, Bill. And I think Charlie probably also would have.
And Charlie, sorry.
Something to definitely to contribute here. But I mean, I think that certainly as Charlie discussed, where we take the time in developing the audit protocols and looking at future audits that we're going to conduct, what were the COVID flexibilities, what were the requirements that were put in place during that period, and making sure that, yes, the protocols reflect that, but then also in protocols reflect those requirements, but then in conducting the audits, being cognizant and aware of those issues. And one of the things about our audit process is that it is an engagement with the provider and opportunities for the provider to bring things to our attention at as early a stage in the process as possible to indicate specific guidance that perhaps we should be aware of. And ideally that's captured in the protocol, but if there's anything else that a provider thinks we should know, that's something that can be shared in the audit process and something we would take into consideration and have discussions with whichever program agency, whether that's DOH, OASIS, OPWD, or OMH, as the case may be. Charlie, I don't know if there's anything you would add to that.
Yeah, I mean, that is, a lot of stuff relating to the public health emergency is when I talked about the program agency review, a lot of time is spent on gathering the guidance, gathering everything with the program agency that's going to apply to what we look at. For instance, I know for a protocol that's been posted, the OASIS protocols, there were tons of guidance, for this 1 year time frame, an individual counseling session could be 23 minutes, as opposed to normally it should have been 25 minutes, tons of things like that, being cognizant of what, was allowable during that time frame. So we really spend a lot of time working with those oversight agencies to gather everything that could apply to our audits to try to make sure we have a comprehensive list of everything that applies to that time frame, because we do know it was such a disruptive thing. And we just really trying to make sure that we have as much as we can, as much as, the provider agencies provide to us, the program agencies, I'm sorry, that we have that all covered in our protocols.
Okay, and if I could just speak briefly to, the higher level organizational, operational impacts. We all hear a lot about, you hear the phrase, pre-pandemic levels, and, getting back if that's possible. The reality is, and throughout that period, this agency, we had regular calls with many of the associations I just mentioned in the midst of the pandemic, because we were all trying to keep track, not just of executive orders, change, emergency notifications, etc., but also to be informed from the field what was going on. And we absolutely ratcheted down, not to say we didn't perform our program integrity responsibilities, but we did it in a manner that was so as to recognize the chaotic environment. What came from that, and I'm sure the provider community experienced the same, is there were many lessons learned. You always look for some positive outcomes or some positive change. One that was clear is you can never communicate enough. That became paramount during that, and also looking at all of the ways our information is shared on our website through presentations. That was really, we've always been committed to it, but that event was a catalyst for all of these enhanced engagements and really doing our level best to provide FAQs, informed responses to questions, presentations, to remove any reticence on a provider's part to reach out to us. If you have a question, that's a good thing to reach out. You're not going to be targeted or put on a list. So we have changed a lot of our processes, and it's a very, very important learning opportunity for the entire delivery system on, despite a crisis and chaos, there are takeaways from that. A microcosm example would be provider has an audit. It may not be a wonderful outcome, but those are opportunities to learn on what was found in internal controls to address some of those issues. So we did it on a larger scale going through that and really tried to enhance our engagements with the entire provider community. We're going to continue to do that. And these webinars are a testament to that. Thanks.
Bill, thank you. That provides very helpful context as well to Mike and Charlie for your perspectives on the same. Let me turn to Kadeen. We have a few more minutes and a few more questions. Kadeen, please go right ahead.
The next question I have on the agenda is the next target publication for ALP, dental, hospice, nursing home transition, transportation, and ambulance taxi livery is Q3 of 2025. In light of this, how should providers, recipients expect these protocols to change?
Yeah, I think I can take that question. So those protocols, they're still in the development process. So they're subject to change, as what we have right now. I think it's expected that the protocols will change, they'll align with any changes in regulations and guidance that have taken place. And in addition, they will have the things that we've talked about prior about, was there COVID guidance provided to us from the agencies to put in there, for service dates, making it clear as to what we're looking, the dates that these apply to.
Thank you for that. Another question that I have is, what are the patterns in fraud and abuse in the Medicaid program that you're observing, if any? Can you provide examples of how you resolve such issues?
So, with issues of fraud and abuse, if those are if those are uncovered via an audit, we're typically, if it's fraud or abuse, we're forwarding those to, law enforcement, something like that, or our, going that route. I'd say the biggest, issue that we see in our audits is missing documentation of just, things that are required to be there that are not. I think, from an audit perspective, we would encourage providers to do their, own internal reviews. When new protocols come out, that is a good time to do such, and self-disclose things where appropriate, because that's going to, mitigate some of the Medicaid overpayment risk, when claims are appropriately self-disclosed.
Thank you for that.
Thanks. And let me ask the next question, if you all don't mind.
Sure.
One of the things that we've been hearing a lot about from our clients is the 1115 waiver amendment. And to just provide background for those who aren't totally up to speed on that, there are several $billion being deployed right now through what was an amendment approved back in January of 24 as between New York State and the federal CMS. And the program rollout has really begun now. We are looking at a conclusion of that activity under the program in March of 27. So things are quite active, or will be. And just in terms of matters of early impression, what is your sense as the OMIG generally, how you are going to approach inquiries concerning that waiver amendment spend, which again is billions of dollars, and will involve both providers already within the Medicaid provider environment, as it were, as well as some new ones that have not previously worked in the Medicaid space?
Yeah, we would encourage these providers to, follow DOH's guidance, as it pertains to that program. This could be a program that we look into developing protocols, something along the lines of that in the future. But as of right now, being such a new program, so we don't have any immediate plans to do that.
But certainly, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just going to say that, but certainly we would approach it in the same manner as we approach any new area in developing protocols and reviewing what our audit criteria might be in the future. And that would be working closely with Department of Health and any other oversight agencies to make sure we have a thorough understanding of the rules and requirements that were put in place for this program. So I don't think that the approach would be any different for any other area, but certainly it's something we're keeping an eye on, and we'll certainly be evaluating as the program continues to mature. I'm sorry, Bill.
No, and I would just add now, Gabe, I think this is the latest, but this is the next iteration, correct? I mean, you recall DSRIP, correct? And that's a different model in the way I'm not as up to speed at present on the current waiver and the flow of monies, but with provider networks, and they create the hubs. We were certainly involved in the initial DSRIP effort, but it was that model was very front end loaded, as you recall. but I think to reiterate what my colleagues were saying, you make decisions, document why you're doing what you're doing, right? Following the guidance of the oversight agency. And, that at the end of the day, that is critical, is to be able to at least demonstrate. And with these waiver programs, there are multiple requirements to do that anyway. So, keeping contemporaneous notes and documenting your activities in line and aligned with Medicaid rules, but also the waiver requirements. And certainly, if there's any suspicion of fraud, please report it. And I just want to most of you know it, but when Charlie referenced if we identify in an audit fraud, we refer it to law enforcement. And that is, again, because by law, we are required to refer credible allegations of fraudulent activity to the Attorney General's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. So that, just to emphasize that point. Thank you.
No, and thank all of you for that response. I think it's fair to say that as things become more finely developed by your office in terms of approach to the waiver amendment, you'll be outbound in your communication and going through the process as you've described that you've taken in developing these protocols and others, and certainly we will be looking forward to hearing more from you as you become more immersed in the program generally. For now, though, what I'm realizing is that we have filled an hour of all of your time. We are delighted that you chose to spend that hour with us. What I see as well is a significant number of questions that came in through the chat. We didn't get a chance to answer all of them. For that, we apologize. We could clearly be here till 5 p.m, given the interest and curiosity of many of the participants. But in deference to the fact that all of you also have work schedules and things that pull you elsewhere, we will conclude momentarily. But I will commit to working with the OMIG, as we've done in our previous webinars, to try to have answers to all of these questions. We will get them to the individuals, who have asked those questions, and if any is essentially generalizable in nature that would be useful for all of you to hear about, we'll make sure that gets out to the broader group. In terms of this series, we continue to have our commitment to it. We see that as all of you have essentially voted with your feet by your continuing willingness to register and otherwise to take part, that you're finding this worth your while, and we are grateful for that. And we intend to have another iteration. This will be the 9th in the coming weeks. Look for information on that formally from our firm, and we'll get those details out to you. As is the case always, we want to make sure that the lines of communication are very much open, either to the bond attorneys who have played a role in preparing and otherwise moving forward with this series, myself included, as well as those representatives of the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General assembled here and who otherwise have been part of this series all along. Let me reiterate my thanks, speaking of the OMIG, to the time that Mike, Charlie, and Bill took today in both preparing the material and making sure that all of you had a chance to hear directly from them concerning the processes and procedures that we know matter so much to all of you. With that, knowing that we've reached the top of the hour, we thank you for your commitment, and we look forward to bringing you the next iteration of our programming soon. In the meanwhile, have a terrific afternoon.